You've learned to look alive while dying inside. You move through the day like a well-oiled ghost, smiling at the right moments, nodding at the right cues, saying you're fine when you know you're not. The world applauds your endurance. They call you strong because you've learned to hide your exhaustion behind competence. But there is a difference between strength and suppression, and you feel it now in the quiet hours. When the applause fades and you can hear the sound of your own depletion. You are not lazy, you are not weak. You are burnt out but pretending you're not. There's a subtle kind of death that comes not from tragedy, but from repetition. You wake, work, perform, sleep. You call it life because everyone else does. But somewhere in that endless motion, you stopped being. And the tragedy of it is not the exhaustion itself, but that you've convinced yourself this is normal, that to constantly fight fatigue, to exist in a haze of almost breaking, is simply what adulthood demands. No, what you call normal is spiritual starvation. The body can survive it for a time, but the soul keeps count. Every compromise, every performance, every moment you silence what you truly feel, the soul remembers. And one day, it rebels. It stops cooperating with the illusion. It refuses to play the part of fine, and you begin to unravel. Not because something went wrong, but because you've carried too much falseness for too long. Burnout isn't just exhaustion, it is rebellion. A revolt from the deepest part of you that can no longer live inside the mask you've built. You see, the greatest pain does not come to destroy you. It comes to introduce you to yourself. But it doesn't knock gently. It breaks through. It cracks open the foundation of everything you thought you were supposed to be. And in that shattering, you face something terrifying. Not the pain itself, but the silence that follows. Because when the noise of performance fades, when all the roles you've played fall silent, what's left is the unfiltered sound of your own being. You without approval, without validation, without duty. And you realize how little of that you've truly met. We live in an age that romanticizes exhaustion. We glorify the busy. We worship those who never rest. We call burnout a badge of honor, proof of ambition. But the truth is darker. Burnout is not proof that you care too much. It's evidence that you've forgotten what truly matters. It begins quietly. You feel tired, but you dismiss it. You call it a phase. You tell yourself that peace will come after the next deadline, after the next milestone, after the next achievement. You believe you are chasing success, but what you're really chasing is relief from the hunger for validation, from the ache of not feeling enough. And when you reach that milestone, that new level, you notice something unsettling. The relief doesn't come. The applause fades faster each time. The satisfaction dies before you can name it. And so you push harder, not out of joy, but out of fear. Fear of what might surface if you ever stop. That's the real burnout. Not in your body, in your being. We don't burn out because we work too much. We burn out because we betray ourselves too often. Every time you say yes when you mean no. Every time you pretend to be okay just to be liked. Every time you stay silent when your soul wants to speak. You drain the well of your vitality. And eventually, there's nothing left to draw from. The light dims not because life is cruel, but because you've been shining outward for so long, you forgot to feed the flame within. You tell yourself you have no choice, that this is what success requires, that you can't afford to pause. But listen, if the price of progress is your peace, it isn't progress, it's self-erasure. Somewhere inside, a voice whispers, stop. But you silence it with noise. You drown it in productivity. You distract it with screens, with people, with endless doing. Because to stop would mean to feel, to face the hollowness that all this pretending has built. But the longer you postpone that confrontation, the deeper the emptiness grows. Until one day, you find yourself sitting in your car after work, staring at nothing, unable to move. Not crying, not thinking, just empty. The performance has run out of script. The body moves, but the will is gone. The mind tries to motivate, but the soul no longer believes. And in that stillness, a realization pierces through. This isn't living. This is survival on autopilot. And yet that realization, as painful as it is, marks the beginning of your return. Because only when the false self collapses can the real self emerge. Burnout is not the end. It is an invitation to stop pretending, to stop performing, to finally meet the truth of what you've been avoiding. yourself, and the truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. You start to recognize that the world's definition of strong was a lie, that endurance without meaning is not courage but conformity, that to keep pushing when your spirit is gasping is not noble, it's self-abandonment. True strength is not in pretending you're fine, it's in daring to admit you're not, and in having the courage to change what that truth demands. You've carried the world for so long, thinking it was your duty to hold it all together. But perhaps your exhaustion is not failure. Perhaps it is grace, forcing you to release what was never yours to bear. You are tired because you've been living against yourself. And the body, the mind, the spirit, they always keep score. Burnout is the moment they revolt together and say, no more. Not another day of pretending. Not another moment of living a life that feels borrowed. This is the crack in the facade, and the light is starting to get in. There was a time when you thought you were chasing excellence, but in truth, you were fleeing from inadequacy. You mistook anxiety for ambition. You thought your restlessness meant you were destined for greatness, but it only meant you had forgotten how to be still. You called it drive. The world praised you for it, but it was not drive, it was hunger. Hunger for approval. Hunger for proof that you were enough. You built your life on that hunger. You learned to perform before you learned to feel. You mastered efficiency before you understood meaning. You trained yourself to always reach, never to rest. And so you became fluent in pretending fluent, in the art of appearing whole while secretly running on fragments. The modern world rewards this sickness. It calls it productivity. It crowns the most exhausted with medals of admiration. It tells you to push harder, to grind, to outwork everyone. But what it really means is sacrifice yourself quietly. The machine needs fuel. And you, with your dreams and your conscience, will burn beautifully. You were taught that your worth depends on what you produce. That to stop is to fall behind. That rest is indulgence. That silence is laziness. And so you began to confuse movement with progress. You became addicted to the feeling of being busy, even when the busyness led nowhere, because being still terrified you. Stillness exposed the emptiness. You joined the cult of endless, becoming the belief that life is a ladder and that fulfillment is always one rung higher. You postponed peace until you were successful, but success kept moving. Every time you climbed, the ladder grew taller. Every time you achieved, the goalposts shifted. And you never noticed that what you called ambition had quietly become slavery. You told yourself you were becoming someone, but you were actually running from someone. The self that wasn't polished enough, confident enough, admired enough. The self that still felt small. So you buried it beneath achievements, hoping no one would notice. But you did. You noticed. And every time you smiled for a photo or celebrated a win, a quiet voice inside whispered, "This isn't me." That voice is the last honest thing left in you. You thought burnout was fatigue. It's not. It's grief. The grief of realizing you've lived for everything but your own truth. Look closely at what you call your life. Notice how much of it exists for others' eyes. The job you hate but can't leave because it validates you. The friendships that drain you but make you look social. The relationship you maintain because being alone terrifies you. The dreams you advertise because silence feels like death. All of it is theater. And you've been both actor and audience applauding your own performance because no one else clapped long enough. There's a phrase people use, fake it till you make it. But no one tells you what happens when you fake it too well. You forget what was real to begin with. You become the costume. You wear confidence like armor, charm like perfume, success like a mask. But armor rusts, perfume fades, masks crack. And when they do, when the applause ends, the silence behind them feels unbearable. You start to notice small fractures. The conversations you used to enjoy now feel hollow. The people who once inspired you now irritate you. You scroll endlessly, not to connect, but to numb. You wake up tired. You go to bed anxious. You work, but nothing satisfies. You eat, but nothing nourishes. You talk, but nothing reaches. It's not depression, it's depletion. You've emptied yourself trying to belong. And belonging built on pretending is the loneliest kind. You've lived your life as if on stage, curating every expression, every word, every accomplishment, to fit the story you thought others wanted. But offstage, there's nothing left. You've lost the quiet familiarity of being with yourself. You avoid solitude because it exposes the void. But that void is not your enemy. It's the truth you've abandoned. It's the silence of the real self waiting to be remembered. You've been trained to measure life by output, to equate exhaustion with importance, to feel guilty for doing nothing. But tell me, what kind of life demands you to exhaust yourself just to prove you deserve to exist? You've mistaken approval for oxygen. You've inhaled it for so long, you forgot how to breathe freely. Every compliment became a breath, every like, every nod, every title. Without them, you suffocate. But that's not breathing, that's dependency. And dependency always becomes prison. Because once your sense of worth depends on others' perception, you'll do anything to maintain it. You'll censor your truth. You'll overcommit. You'll betray your boundaries. You'll say yes when your soul screams no. You'll let people use you because being used feels better than being unseen. The tragedy is that you don't even realize you're negotiating your dignity. You call it humility. You call it teamwork. You call it love. But what it really is fear. Fear of being abandoned by the very world that drains you. And fear makes slaves of the ambitious. You thought you were free because you chose your path. But choice means nothing if it's driven by desperation. Freedom isn't having options, it's having nothing to prove. Burnout doesn't come from hard work. It comes from false work, the work you do to maintain illusions. The effort of sustaining a self you no longer believe in. The exhaustion of constantly wearing emotional armor in a world that rewards performance over authenticity. You became so accustomed to being admired that you forgot how to be understood. And admiration without understanding is isolation. You are praised but unseen, surrounded yet alone, productive yet empty. And so you begin to live as two selves, the visible one and the hidden one. The visible self is sharp, confident, relentless. The hidden self is tired, uncertain, quietly begging for rest. But the more the visible self is rewarded, the deeper the hidden one retreats, until one day you can't find it anymore. You've become a stranger to your own soul. You call that progress. The world calls it success, but the soul calls it betrayal. The world doesn't ask you to be well. It asks you to be useful. It doesn't care if you're at peace, only that you're efficient. And so you comply. You perform wellness while silently decaying. You say you're grateful while secretly suffocating. You call it balance while living on the edge of collapse. The irony is that the same qualities that built your success, discipline, adaptability, endurance are the ones that now imprison you, because you learned to tolerate everything. And tolerance, when misused, becomes self-neglect. You've learned to tolerate meaningless meetings, empty conversations, shallow victories. You've learned to tolerate disrespect, disguised as expectations. You've learned to tolerate a life that looks good but feels wrong. And tolerance, my friend, has cost you your aliveness. You are not supposed to endure endlessly. You are supposed to discern, to know when something nourishes you and when it depletes you. But somewhere along the line, you began to believe that pain equals purpose. That struggle is always noble, that suffering is proof of worth. And that lie, that most seductive lie, has enslaved millions. You believed you had to earn your right to rest. That rest was a luxury reserved for the accomplished. That stillness was for the weak. So you punished yourself with motion. You filled every silence with noise. Because if you ever stopped, you feared the truth would catch up, that you were not living, only performing existence. And the cruelest part, you were good at it. Too good, so no one saw your suffering. They only saw your shine. They envied your productivity, your resilience, your consistency. They said you were an example. They said you had it all together. But you knew the truth. You were falling apart privately and efficiently. And so you learned to hide your burnout beneath laughter, behind "I'm just tired." You learned to disguise collapse as composure. You smiled through the unraveling, telling yourself, "It's just a rough patch." But deep down, you knew this isn't a patch. This is a pattern, and patterns don't break by themselves. Burnout is not a warning sign. It is the consequence. The final stage of long-term self-abandonment. And yet, within that collapse lies the beginning of something sacred, because every illusion eventually collapses under its own weight. The false self can only carry pretense for so long before gravity takes its due. When that happens, when the performance finally shatters, you will feel lost. But you are not lost, you are being freed. Because the destruction of the false is the revelation of the true, at first the fall is invisible. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins with small hesitations. You stare at your phone and forget what you are going to type. You sit at your desk and the mind feels like smoke. You open your mouth to speak and hear yourself repeating words you no longer believe. You tell yourself it's nothing. You push through as always. But something inside is crumbling, something essential, something that no amount of caffeine or positive thinking can repair. One morning you wake up. And it feels different. The air is heavier. The world feels distant. You go through the motions, shower, coffee, commute, but your body is a marionette and the strings are tired of moving. The faces around you blur. Their voices hum like static. You've become a ghost among the living. Then it hits quietly, devastatingly. The collapse. It doesn't look dramatic. There's no explosion, no screaming, just stillness. A moment when you realize that your will, that fierce, disciplined engine that's always carried you, has gone silent. You sit there, staring into nothing, and it's as if the meaning has leaked out of everything. You don't want to quit. You just can't continue. And for the first time, you admit it to yourself. You are done. Not done with life, not done with purpose. Done with the pretending, done with the endless motion, done with performing strength for a world that mistakes numbness for resilience. What you feel in that moment is not weakness, it's truth. It's the raw, unedited reality of your limits, the boundary between the false and the real. You are touching the end of an illusion, and that's what dying feels like when you're still alive. You will cry, perhaps, or you won't. Sometimes burnout doesn't bring tears, just emptiness. A hollow ache where joy used to be, a dull indifference that frightens you more than pain. You'll sit there, surrounded by all the things you thought would make you happy, the titles, the possessions, the messages, the followers, and you'll feel nothing. And that nothing will terrify you, because for so long your worth depended on feeling something, progress, momentum, validation. But now, stripped of all that, you're left with silence. That silence is the sound of your old self dying. You might think you failed. You'll call it burnout, depression, fatigue. But in truth, it's initiation. The old identity, the one fueled by applause and fear, cannot continue. It has served its time. It was necessary once, perhaps, to help you survive. But now it has become your prison. And nature, in her strange mercy, is breaking you out. Yes, mercy. Because sometimes mercy comes as destruction. The soul, when ignored too long, becomes a revolution. It dismantles everything built on falseness. The job that defined you will feel unbearable. The relationships that fed your ego will start to suffocate you. The routines that once made you feel safe will feel like chains. It's not madness, it's clarity, painful, cleansing clarity. The old self fights back, of course. It panics. It calls this collapse failure. It clings to the familiar pain, because the unknown freedom beyond it is terrifying. You'll try to fix yourself, to bounce back, to return to who you were. But something in you knows that person is gone, and mourning that old self will feel like grieving a loved one, because you've lived with it for years, you've invested in it, you've built a life around it. But no amount of nostalgia can resurrect a version of you that no longer fits. You are being dismantled, not punished. This is the necessary fracture, the sacred breakdown, the shattering of the mask that kept you distant from your own soul. You've been running on borrowed fire. Now the fuel is gone, and only truth remains. Let yourself break. Do not rush to rebuild. Every collapse holds instructions in its ruins. There is something you must see here before you move again. The world will not understand. It never does. It will tell you to get back on track, to stay productive, to find balance. But balance is meaningless if the scale itself is broken. You don't need to fix this moment. You need to witness it. This is the first time in years that you are not pretending. That alone is sacred. Sit in the wreckage. Feel the weight of your own silence. Let the truth breathe through the cracks, that you were never meant to sustain that old rhythm, that the life that broke you was never yours to keep. You are not falling apart, you are being rearranged. The collapse is not destruction, it's realignment. The house of cards was never stable, it was only decorated well. The fire doesn't burn to ruin you, it burns to reveal what cannot be destroyed. And when the smoke clears, when the noise dies, you'll find something still standing quiet, unshaken, unpretentious. That is the beginning of you. The one who doesn't perform, doesn't chase, doesn't beg, the one who simply is. You will not recognize yourself at first. You'll look in the mirror and see someone raw, unguarded, empty. But emptiness is space, and space is potential. You've spent your life filling space with noise. Now you will learn to fill it with presence. That is the task now, not to rebuild the old self, but to forge something truer, something born from silence rather than fear. Because here, in the aftermath of collapse, something extraordinary happens. The exhaustion begins to lose its bitterness. You stop resenting the fall. You start to understand its necessity. You realize that burnout wasn't a curse, it was a messenger. It came to tell you what you refused to hear, that you had been living against yourself. And what a strange relief that brings. Because now, for the first time, you are free from pretending. The applause has faded, the noise is gone, the persona has dissolved, and what's left fragile, quiet, trembling is real. That is the ground upon which everything true will be built. After the collapse, there is silence. And in that silence, a question emerges not from the mind, but from something deeper. It asks, softly but unavoidably, now that you are free from pretending, who will you become? At first, you won't know. The old reflex will try to answer, to plan, to optimize, to rebuild. It will tell you to set goals, to chase purpose, to prove your worth again. But don't listen. That is the voice of the same false god that burned you. The rebuilding of the self does not begin with doing. It begins with being. For the first time, you must learn to sit inside your own existence without trying to improve it. To inhabit your life as it is, unadorned, unproductive, unperformative. This is not laziness, it is initiation. The discipline of stillness is the first act of sovereignty. You were taught that power means control, that to master life, you must dominate it, bend it to your will. But now, you see, control was always a disguise for fear. True power is not domination, it is self-possession. It is the quiet certainty that you belong to yourself, that no external force can define the rhythm of your peace. You begin small. You start to notice how much of your life was automated by anxiety. The way you rushed to respond to every message, every demand, every expectation, as if your value depended on speed. Now you stop. You let silence answer for you. You begin to realize that not everything requires your energy, only the things that are true. Stillness becomes a mirror. In it, you see what remains when performance ends. You see that you are not your accomplishments. You are not your failures. You are not even your ambition. You are awareness itself, the quiet witness behind every rise and fall, every success and burnout, every illusion and awakening. And as that awareness strengthens, you feel something unexpected, calm. Not the shallow calm of a weekend off, but the deep calm of detachment, the kind that comes when the world no longer dictates your worth. You begin to understand solitude not as punishment, but as privilege. Because when you no longer fear being alone, no one can own you. New system, new employer, new relationship, new audience. Solitude is the forge where the fragments of your will melt into something whole again. In solitude, you meet the voice that had been buried under years of noise. It speaks quietly, with the gravity of truth. You have chased everything except yourself. That voice becomes your new compass. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it guides. And as you follow it, you begin to rebuild not from ambition, but from alignment. You start removing what doesn't belong, the tasks that deplete you, the people who drain you, the goals that aren't yours. You cut with precision, not resentment. This is not destruction, it's pruning. Every removal creates space for something genuine to grow. You begin to see that the purpose of burnout was purification. It burned away the unnecessary, the roles, the performances, the illusions, so that what remains is pure intent. Your will, no longer divided by pretense, becomes focused. Not frantic, but firm. Not desperate, but deliberate. You no longer wake up to impress. You wake up to express. To live in harmony with what feels truthful, not popular, not profitable, but true. And truth, once embodied, radiates a different kind of power, silent, stable, untouchable. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't crave acknowledgement. It simply is. You start to understand the art of withdrawal, the wisdom of stepping back, not in defeat, but in clarity. You realize that not every battle is worth fighting, not every opinion worth answering, not every opportunity worth taking. Because power is not expansion, it is concentration. The mature soul doesn't scatter its light, it focuses it. The world still tempts you with noise. It still tries to pull you back into the machinery of distraction. But now, you recognize it for what it is, the theater of the unawakened. You no longer perform there. You observe it like a distant echo of your former self. You start valuing depth over speed, meaning over motion, peace over praise. The more you slow down, the sharper your perception becomes. You notice subtleties you never saw before, the way sunlight falls on your table in the morning, the quiet intelligence of your own breath, the beauty of an unhurried thought. You are learning how to exist not as an actor, but as a being. This is how the new self is forged, not in grand gestures, but in small refusals. Refusals to lie, to rush, to please, to betray your rhythm. Each refusal strengthens the spine of your integrity. And integrity, once restored, becomes the architecture of peace. There will still be fear, there will still be doubt, but they no longer rule you, they visit and leave. You've learned to let thoughts pass without entertaining them. You've learned that reaction is bondage, but reflection is freedom. You've learned that to be unbothered is not indifference, it's mastery. The real work now is invisible. It's the way you hold yourself in solitude, the way you speak to yourself in failure, the way you no longer beg for what is already yours, your own worth. You will find that silence, once unbearable, becomes your ally. You no longer fear it, you crave it. Because silence is the language of strength. It is where you hear the voice of your soul, not the noise of the world. You will rediscover will not the restless, frantic will that once burned you, but a purified will, a will anchored in clarity. You no longer strive for endless victory. You choose worthy struggle. You no longer seek comfort. You seek truth. And truth, once found, simplifies everything. There's a new fire now, not the one that consumes, but the one that illuminates. You move differently. You speak less. You observe more. People notice the change, though they can't name it. You seem calmer, heavier, more grounded. It's because you are no longer pulled by appearances. You have become your own gravity. And that quiet gravity is what freedom feels like. Freedom is not euphoria. It is composure, the steady pulse of someone who no longer negotiates their peace. It's not the loud confidence of those performing strength. It's the stillness of someone who knows they no longer need to prove anything. You have learned that the highest power is not in control, but in consent, the ability to choose where your energy flows, who you allow near, what you allow to matter. You are no longer chasing life, you are creating it from the inside out. And this shift from external striving to internal sovereignty is the birth of peace. The world may still call you ambitious, but you know better now. Ambition without clarity is chaos. You have exchanged ambition for alignment. You are no longer trying to conquer the world. You are mastering the kingdom within. You've stopped fighting the storm. You've become the eye of it. That is what rebirth looks like. Not a new identity, but the quiet reclaiming of what was always yours, your center. When the fire has done its work, when the noise of the old life fades into a distant hum, something new rises in its place, not joy, not triumph, but stillness. A quiet kind of strength, like the moment before dawn when the sky holds its breath. You stand there, inside yourself, unrecognizable yet finally whole. You are not happy in the way you once understood happiness. You are clear. You no longer crave. You no longer chase. You no longer mistake movement for meaning. The constant hunger that once drove you has dissolved into a steady calm. The world still tries to tempt you with admiration, with urgency, with the seduction of more, but its voice no longer has power. You've seen behind the curtain. You've met the machinery of illusion and found it hollow. What replaced it is something you cannot display or post or monetize. It is a private wealth, the serenity of no longer needing to perform, the freedom of being unseen yet certain of your worth, the grace of living not for applause but for alignment. You wake in the morning without panic. You move without rush. You no longer calculate your worth through productivity or praise. You do what must be done and nothing more. There is dignity in that restraint. The new self doesn't seek to conquer the day. It seeks to inhabit it fully. This is what sobriety feels like, not in the narrow sense of abstaining from pleasure, but in the grand sense of awakening from illusion. You are sober from the drug of validation, sober from the narcotic of approval, sober from the endless intoxication of becoming someone. The sober mind doesn't swing between elation and despair. It lives in quiet truth. It sees things as they are neither inflated nor diminished. It doesn't demand that life feel good. It demands that life be real. You no longer perform wellness. You embody peace. You no longer demand love. You radiate it quietly. You no longer chase purpose. You breathe it. You used to think power was loud, that it roared and dazzled. Now you see that real power is silent. It moves without announcement. It flows like an underground river, nourishing everything it touches, yet asking for nothing in return. When you speak now, your words carry weight not because they are clever, but because they are rooted in being. People feel it that your calm is not performance, your patience not strategy. They sense that you have died once and returned untouchable. And that untouchability is not arrogance. It is purity, the soul unburdened by the world's games. Indifference, once mistaken for coldness, has become your shield. But this is not the indifference of apathy. It is the indifference of freedom. The ability to witness chaos without being consumed by it. The art of remaining steady when others are swept away by noise. You don't resist the world anymore. You simply see it clearly. You see people chasing what you once chased: attention, control, significance, and you feel no contempt, only understanding. You've been there. You know the hunger. You also know it leads nowhere. Your desires have matured. They are fewer but deeper. You no longer want everything. You want only what aligns. You no longer seek to fill time. You seek to inhabit it. You no longer ask, what do I get? But what do I give without losing myself? And in that giving, paradoxically, you receive more than you ever did. Because what flows from authenticity always returns multiplied. The world still rushes, but you no longer join the race. You walk. Sometimes you stop. Sometimes you sit and simply watch the light change across the wall, feeling gratitude that you are alive to witness such simplicity. This not the grand moment, not the applause. This quiet noticing is the reward. You have become immune to extremes. Praise doesn't intoxicate you. Criticism doesn't wound you. Success doesn't inflate you. Failure doesn't define you. You move through both, as through weather aware, adaptive, unchanged at the core. You have entered what the ancients called ataraxia, tranquility of soul. It's not an escape from life. It's mastery within it. You still feel emotion, but emotion no longer commands you. You experience desire, but desire no longer enslaves you. You act, but you do not react. You've learned that to live well is not to chase constant highs, but to dwell in steady clarity. To see things as they are, not as you wish they'd be. To love people for what they reveal, not for what they provide. To accept pain as the toll of consciousness, not as injustice. This is the sober self, the one that no longer needs illusions to function. From here, ambition becomes art, not escape. Work becomes expression, not obligation. Relationships become communion, not transaction. You stop clinging to outcomes because you finally trust your own becoming. You realize that life was never about achievement. It was always about awareness. That every rise and fall was designed to wake you, not reward you. That what you once called loss was simply transformation in disguise. The world around you hasn't changed, but you have, and that changes everything. You used to burn for recognition. Now you burn quietly for truth. You used to chase significance. Now you see that existence itself is miraculous enough. You used to fear endings. Now you see that every ending is an opening disguised as grief. You no longer rush to heal every wound. You let some scars remain, reminders that you've survived the fire. You no longer hide your exhaustion. You wear it with grace, a testament to the battles that birthed your clarity. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You know that understanding is a luxury of depth, and not everyone has drowned that far. Your peace is not fragile anymore. It no longer depends on external order. It lives inside you, unbothered by the world's turbulence. The storm can rage, the noise can swell, but you remain still, watching the chaos like an old friend who has lost its power to frighten you. You have learned the most difficult lesson of all: how to be free in a world built on dependency. Freedom is not isolation, it is intimacy with reality. It's the courage to see life exactly as it is, flawed, fleeting, unpredictable, and to love it anyway. You now understand that the opposite of burnout is not rest, it is truth. The truth of who you are when nothing needs to be proven. The truth that your worth is not cumulative, not conditional, not comparative. The truth that peace is not earned, it's remembered. And so you live differently now. You give without depletion. You work without losing yourself. You love without clinging. You rest without guilt. You rise without rush. You are not pretending anymore. You are becoming. The fire has done its work. The illusions have burned to ash. And from those ashes, the new self stands calm, lucid, quietly, radiant, not desperate for applause, not desperate for meaning, because it has become meaning itself. You are not what you've lost. You are what survived. And what survived is enough. So when the world asks if you're okay, you don't smile to protect them anymore. You smile because you are. Not perfectly, not constantly, but truthfully. You've walked through the ruin and found the root. You've burned, but not wasted. You've fallen, but not broken. The person you were is gone. The one who remains is real. And that is the quiet miracle of awakening. You are no longer pretending. You are becoming. And this time you are finally awake.